Hello and welcome to episode 79 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogyn1701, here for special 2410 Election Day coverage. We have several hotly contested races going on around the Federation, and preliminary results are starting to come in. With 90% of precincts reporting, we're ready to declare Roundtable co-host Markhawkman as the winner for Federation Council representative from Vulcan. Congratulations.
Wait, I'm not even playing a Vulcan.
I know, that's why it's particularly impressive. And we've had an upset in the race for planetary governor of Mars. That's right. Our very own Greendragoon lost to none other than the famous Wesley Crusher.
Yeah, he can have the job.
Well, it's still a crushing defeat.
Yeah, but now he's stuck on Mars.
That's a good place for him. And we're joined tonight by talking heads, expert analysts Castmodean and CaptPFDennis.
Hello.
It's doom, but not as we know it.
But turning away from election news, onto more important things. Mission reviewing was turned on back on Thursday night, meaning that the Delta Rising maintenance cycle for the Foundry has officially come to a close. And that makes it 16 days by my count, which is one of the smoother maintenance cycles we've ever experienced. That background sound you're hearing was us clinking glasses, toasting to the Foundry. Or something else, who knows.
Which, by the way, we need more Romulan ale.
Yes. Speaking of elections, I think we should try and get on the ballot the legalization of Romulan ale.
I think it's already legal. I think it was illegal because of the embargo. And that's no longer in effect. At least with the Romulan Republic.
Well, the Republic has a lot more liberal laws, right? We assume. Anyway.
Yeah.
In any case, there's still a few minor bugs going on in the Foundry, specifically like the lighting bug in the couple of generic Federation interiors. There was one reported this week. Rank pips for the Hizari outfits are appearing on the person's bare neck. I suspect those aren't really supposed to be enabled for that anyway, so Frost has been posting and looking into these things, so hopefully we'll get some fixes in. The only thing that I would kind of describe as game-breaking is that one user seems to be getting an error attempting to play a map when testing a map every time. A couple of us have seen this intermittently, but DJX Prime is getting it consistently. So I don't know if anybody else is.
So yeah, I've been seeing it a little bit, but if I changed the number of assets or deleted some assets, it would go away. So I'm not entirely sure what's causing it. I don't think it's any specific asset or map. I don't know, it's just some weird resourcing, I guess.
I saw it on Tribble a couple of times, but it would always go away if I restarted the mission, if I restarted the editor. And I have not seen it on Holodeck. So hopefully Cryptic Frost can work something out. But really, there hasn't been a whole lot of bad stuff going on here. So I think this is, one of the smoothest maintenance periods we've ever had.
Yeah, I mean,
certainly better than Legacy of Romulus.
And more assets than Legacy of Romulus.
As we were talking about before the show, see, what did we get for Legacy of Romulus? We got the friendly Romulan and Reman mobs. We got the Alachi mobs.
Not until way later, as I recall.
Well, because it took the Foundry so long to come back.
Squirrels.
Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah,
Squirrels, we got. I think it took a long time for us to get squirrels.
Yeah, I think it was well after, months and months and months and months after that we started to get stuff from Legacy of Romulus.
Yeah,
it was around the same time we got the boss.
3 weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah, those nice bridge pieces and waterfall.
Mm-hmm. That's because Taco had not become our friend yet when Legacy of Romulus hit. He is our friend now.
And speaking of Taco, he actually wrote us on Twitter to let us know or make a couple of clarifications on things we covered last week. First off, he actually said, "Mark, I owe you an apology. You were right. There are, in fact, a few Champions Online assets in Stowe. Apparently, when they initially started Stowe as a project, they literally copied over Champions Online and then built it from there. So a few assets made it over as a result of that.
Well, I mean, my statement was based on playing both games and looking around and seeing things that looked, the same.
Yeah, so it could very well be that there are assets that are same between the two games. He also posted to clarify that the hoverboards are not so much they don't ride on any sort of special layer. What happens is that the ground underneath the water has to be a certain height in order for the surfboards to appear properly. So it's not even a layer or anything. It's literally just they have to plan the terrain properly.
So the thing that sort of creates a cutoff for that, where if you go on to the beach, it disappears. So is that based on height? Is that how that works?
That probably is a volume of some kind. But I'm going to guess that if we tried to put, say, a surfboard on just any old Foundry map with water, it wouldn't look right because it would either be too high or too low on the water. Because I think what we were talking about more than that is something to turn it on so you can actually activate it and ride it. Yeah, but yeah, I think his point he was trying to make though is that you may well be able to give us that, but it may not look right on different water other than the New Ryza map.
Doesn't bother me.
Yeah,
it's limited.
We say that until we get things like floater volumes, and then complain about the obvious fact that most people don't have floaters.
No, we're a capricious lot, I'm afraid.
One thing to remember with floaters that you can't even buy the basic ones unless the Ryza event is active.
I think
there was talk.
Okay.
I say there was talk about people, on the forums about maybe, in what is it, Step Between the Stars, there is a map where it puts a floater on you, whether you had one or not.
Yeah,
it would be nice to be able to get that somehow.
Yeah,
I could.
But that's something for the devs to sort out, if that's even possible.
Now we're talking about rappelling and zip lines and all kinds of stuff.
How awesome would that be?
I'm not even entirely sure how exactly that works on the back end.
And I don't know. I mean, it's strange because that's always sort of it was not what I was expecting because it's sort of an on rails thing. It's like you only use it where we let you use it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and you can't aim it, you can't adjust it. So I don't know how that would be to.
I think it's basically a cutscene that plays while the game relocates you from one point of the map to another. It's kind of like a door with a cutscene instead of a loading screen.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I think it's not quite that, but essentially it's something that you don't have any control over.
Yeah, it definitely seems more elaborate than simple volume or anything like that.
But it's something that would definitely be cool to be able to do in Foundry missions, is to set one of those up.
Oh yeah. Well, someday.
But in any case, the Foundry is back up and reviews are back online. So why don't we go around the horn and talk to everybody about what we've been working on? So Paul, why don't we start with you? What have you been working on?
Sure. I'm just starting a mission now. I'm about 3 or 4 maps in. I've decided to do a little different story this time. I'm making a zombie mission. It's not something I generally do, but I had some good ideas. Just making maps right now. I haven't done anything too great story-wise. Just a lot of technobabble.
Have you figured out how you're going to make your zombies?
Yes, Oh yes, physically they're already done, and the backstory as to the how and why is done.
So, tell us about like the technical side of it. How are you going to make your zombies?
Well, I use the Borg infected base complexion, and then sometimes I'll use the some of the spots. I'll put like red around the mouths if they'll, cannibalizing, so that they're like blood spattered in places. But basically, they're just thin and infected and, very light, very white looking.
If I could suggest something, I think some of the new Kobali outfits are like damaged, like they have burns and things on them.
Yep.
Also, do we know if did we ever get the Wrath of Khan outfits?
I believe so.
In Foundry, I thought we did.
I think we
Okay.
do, yeah.
'Cause that's another tattered outfit.
Well, one thing that I thought of was that someone, I think his name was Ere, was tinkering with doing things with animations, and noticed something very interesting with certain idle animations, is that if it's a mob that can fight, they will only stand up when they're not using their idle animation. So you can do things like make them lay on the ground looking like they're dead until you get close to them.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And you can do the there's an animation, I forget what the title of it is, but it almost makes it look like you're crouching down eating something.
Yeah, it's
Have
cannibalized.
them eating cannibalized. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
There's another one of those remnants from from Champions Online.
There's forage too, which is close.
Yeah, I did a zombie mission not too long ago, Cold Winds, where I did. It was actually more like a 28 days later rage zombie kind of a thing, instead of actual dead people. So, I don't know. I used what are they? Mugato mobs for my zombies.
That's what I did too.
Yeah.
Got to.
Because they'll occasionally jump on you and start trying to eat you or something. And they don't use energy weapons, which is nice.
Yep. Yeah, and I don't want to give too much away about it because there's really a lot of thought is going into the how and the why, because that's my one complaint with all the zombie films I've seen, is that it's just not enough explanation. People, it's a virus. Okay. Which I get, but this is detailed.
Another thing that I've noticed about your average zombie movie is that they don't really ever attempt to explain why the zombies behave the way they do. They're just like, oh, they're zombies. They're going to eat your brains because they're zombies.
I do. I explain it. That I've done already.
My personal suggestion would be mutated Alachi spores.
I'll say mine has to do with the Federation curious to know how the Kobali reproduce.
And something goes horribly wrong.
Yeah, something like that.
You all, of course, know that mine was the explanation was to do with Star Trek V. Just makes everything funny.
What has got you with a zombie?
Exactly. All right.
You draw so much inspiration from Five.
I know, it's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Castmodean, have you been working on anything in the Foundry lately?
Well, I've been trying to get yet another one of my Sky Castle maps to work right, but I'm not seeing how the lab setup should be, and it's bothering me. So I'm stuck at the moment.
What's holding you up on this one?
Mostly just it doesn't look right. I haven't found the look that I like. So it's me being interior design Foundry designer from hell.
What are you trying to build?
Your standard Daystrom Institute lab.
I could think of a number of different ways that could go.
I'll say, what are they studying?
It's kind of a think tank thing, so it kind of the entire gambit. Artificial intelligence, genetics.
So you could use the science walls, but I'm not entirely a fan.
Yeah, I don't miss Memory Alpha.
So, okay.
Me neither.
This is just me off the top of my head. A sphere, or a circular space with a centralized area that is enclosed in glass.
And if it's like a think tank or something, you could almost do like that centralized area be like have couches and chairs and tables for people to talk. And then rings of consoles around the outside. Just brainstorming here.
Well, we've got window panes now, so
Yeah.
it's always cool to take care of that.
I've already been using that. So there's like you come out of the transporter room into like say a reception area, and that looks out onto the lab itself using the windows. It's just like how I want to lay out the lab is the part that's killing me.
Well, I mean, I would just put a lot of thought into what typically goes on in this space during a normal period of time.
Mad Science Doom?
That's on the off days. What is it when on the regular days?
Really Mad Science Doom.
I've got a lot of bio beds in my lab and a lot of glass. I use those Federation doors that don't have frames, and I frame them in glass.
Bazag is saying fish tank.
Yeah, there will be fish tanks too.
Mm-hmm. But have the fish be super intelligent.
Say it is a genetics
Smart
lab.
fish.
I would use dolphins if I could.
Well, they've already vacated the premises, I'm afraid.
Tell Taco we need dolphins.
Yeah, exactly.
With freaking lasers on their heads.
Well, you can just use Voth dinosaurs, right?
We do actually have some placeable fish props that swim around.
Yep, they're in the fountain already.
Could certainly do things like a big vat, if it's like a genetics lab, because we have placeable water and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing what was it I was trying to find? There used to be an upwards facing steam vent.
Yes.
The fire extinguisher, but I think they fixed the fire extinguisher. Now it's it points sideways and actually has the fire extinguisher itself. But it used to come straight up out of the floor, and I wanted that to do like a spouting fountain effect, but there's nothing that does a spouting fountain effect anymore.
Gosh, I really hate it when they fix bugs. Seriously.
I think there's just steam. I think it's steam O2, but it doesn't shoot out. It just kind of vents out.
It sort of rises.
It's too big. It's way too big. That was the first thing I went to after I was disappointed with the fire extinguisher thing, because I remember once upon a time using the fire extinguisher as like a scram system in Warp Core, which was kind of awesome.
So I'm trying to remember of the new waterfall assets we got. Is there a narrower version?
There is a narrow version, but it's like
those are a little
say
tricky
half
to use,
a football
seems
field instead of a full football field. It's still pretty big.
Okay.
So one thing that just occurred to me is a slight tangent here. Will you zoom in on Castmodean's avatar, Dragoon? Because I wanted to point out, in addition to the Foundry that didn't really make headlines, is the Doctor hair. It's in-game and is also available in the Foundry.
Yes, I finally got my Picardo!
I don't recognize those glasses either.
Those are the goggles, right?
Those are the goggles from the Intel thing, right?
I'm not actually. I don't have the Intel. Those are the wraparound sunglasses from Ryza.
Oh, okay.
From Ryza, yeah.
Which are also in the Foundry, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, those replaced my visor since I still don't have real glasses, and the round ones that we have make me look a little too much like Lawrence Fishburne. And
They're
I don't
too
want to talk
big.
about the Matrix.
That's why I like the. I've got the octagonal ones. No,
I just
not
go-
the
I just go
octagonal.
for-
the
I just
very
go for the
small
full head
ovals.
Well,
Yeah.
I actually have those on one of my characters, but his were I colored them bright green for some reason.
Any case, back to where we were. Dragoon, what have you been working on?
A lot of little things, actually. I've been starting to work on fixes and whatnot for part 2, like getting in stuff like that. I'm starting to get the feedback I've been getting. I've also been kind of playing around with something, and this all started with a trademark symbol. It was suggested that the coming soon on the end of my mission I should add a trademark symbol to comply with Sapiens's definitions of time, whatever his post was.
A brief history of time, according to Sapiens.
Which has this coming soon TM as a much longer than you would think. So this got me into looking into special characters and whether or not the Foundry supports it. And apparently it does. And this kind of led me into kind of searching for other special characters that the Foundry might support. And at the end of it, I ended up coming up with this. A couple of ASCII isolinear chips. You'd be using what are called box characters, which if anyone from way back when in computing remembers the old DOS days, they used to make all of their like windows and whatnot out of text, and they had special characters to form boxes and shapes and whatnot. And
I actually memorized some of the character numbers for those because I used them in certain things I did.
Well, I mean, a lot of those characters are still around, although many fonts don't support them. So I found out that the basic box shapes, mostly just the single line box, are still in there and work. And so I made these isolinear chips. Now, unfortunately, because this isn't a monospace font, they don't perfectly line up, and there's little gaps in it. And I found out that they break if you try to highlight them in the out of character or mission info text. But still, I thought it was kind of cool.
Definitely something that you could use in dialogue because, I mean, up till now we haven't really had any graphics that we can put in the dialogue.
Yeah. I'm toying with it. I mean, I got to come up with a part 3 that's better than part 2, so I've got my work cut out for it. So I'm thinking maybe an isolinear chip puzzle or something like that.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of feedback are you getting on part 2?
Very good. It's making me nervous.
Because how can you beat that now?
Yeah, pretty much.
So
He tried to crash Twitter the other day talking about it. Everybody knows Midas crashes things whenever it's exposed to it.
Yeah, it didn't break. What's
we
up
call
with
it
that?
the Midas touch. All right, Mark, have you been doing anything in the Foundry lately?
No, afraid not. Been a bit busy and haven't had time for it lately.
I know how you feel. Doing things in game and in other games has not led to much Foundry time for me, but I did start a build for my Herogen missions, which is part of the... I'm trying to make it look like a city on the other side of that big wall on New Romulus. So I'm using the wall and then using Romulan buildings and having the wall in the background, essentially. The question is how to make it look like it goes all the way around when there's really, the backside of that wall is not modeled. So I don't know, it's a work in progress. And unfortunately, the Romulan buildings that we have don't really match that wall in any sort of design sense. So I don't know. Taco, build some new Romulan buildings for me. Right now, please. Still, it's cool that we have that wall, at the very least.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move it along. The reason we have gathered here today in this asteroid base is that we're going to keep going with our reviews of Delta Rising missions. So we're going to review mission number 2, which is Reunion, or as many people, I assume, call it, the Neelix mission.
One of them, anyway.
One of them, anyway. Yes. But we won't spoil anything for anybody later in Delta Rising. Just for now, let's take a look at Reunion. So the basic plot is you get contacted by Neelix, who is still serving in his capacity as Federation ambassador to the Delta Quadrant, and you come and check out his asteroid base here, help him out with a little Kazon problem, and then assist in evacuating this base and taking them to a new planet. A new planet at which you encounter the Malon for the first time. Because they're doing their usual thing of dumping radiation willy-nilly, which you get to clean up.
It's also kind of amusing, right? the what the Malon say about the Federation.
It's that sort of first inkling you get of, what did people think of the Federation, right?
Yeah, and apparently Malon came to hate the Federation with a passion.
Really?
You get one guy who actually adopted the technology and needed help, straightening it out. He was actually using an alternate method of disposing of the waste.
Now, where did you see that? Because I don't remember seeing that. Is that later in one of the patrols or something?
It might have been, but it was a sole dialogue. It was just like one Malon.
Well, one thing right off the bat I would say about this mission is tell people that it's not probably worth running on Elite, because the only thing you're going to get the more XP from is the Kazon at the start, and there's not very many of them. Because when you encounter the Malon at the end, you actually disable them, you don't destroy them, so you don't get any XP from that. So that's just a little advice. Bazag says that is a patrol mission, but it's later in the Delta Rising progression. So I don't know, what did you guys think of this mission?
I think overall it's a very good Helix introduction mission. Obviously, a lot of it is meant to kind of pick up where we last left them. I will say the first time I played through this, I got confused. I thought this was meant to be the original Talaxian base that we saw in Voyager, which
they said they moved from it. Yeah.
Yeah, and because this is nowhere near where that one should be. But yeah, I'm kind of curious why they went to all the trouble to pack up from the base they had, move, and then build an entirely new base.
It was established in that episode that they're nomadic in a sense.
They were being forced to leave anyway because they were invading that other species minefield, wasn't it? I mean, mining operation.
And I think wasn't there a line in the mission that says something like they'd outgrown that base?
Yeah, I think so.
Plus, I mean, it's been 40 years, so.
True.
In this one, their reason for leaving seems to have something to do with the Kazon.
Yeah, apparently the Kazon have really expanded. I mean, they were not this far out in the Delta Quadrant in Voyager. Because the Necrid Expanse was the dividing point in Voyager between the earlier stuff with the Kazon and whatnot, and the later stuff, which they basically kind of heralded off their move into Borg space.
Well, the Kazon are nomadic scavengers, so it makes sense that they would try to fill in any sort of a power vacuum that Voyager created.
Yeah.
I mean, because with Janeway fought the Kazon many times and drastically weakened some of the Kazon sects, but some of them. Some of the others, well, they just kind of like stood back and laughed at the others as they got shot up by Voyager and then picked up the pieces.
There was definitely a lot of interplay in politics between the Kazon sects.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure they were meant to reflect mirror the Highland clans, Scottish Highland clans. They're right down to the tartans.
And the bad haircuts.
I never would have made that connection.
Yeah.
Well, some of the Kazon clans have a different style of dress than others do, because one of them seems to prefer textured vinyl to art.
Well, so did the Cardassians originally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Them in their pleather outfits.
Oh, they were horrible.
Their padded pleather armor.
Say that's the only bad thing about their introduction episode.
Well,
it was still better than the
in all
Ferengi.
fairness, though, Colmus Set's uniform was never seen again.
Yeah, it's
And
still
it
better
was
than
much
the
more
was
Ferengi
his
introduction.
facial hair.
Don't forget the mutton chops.
Yeah.
Oh, and as a point of trivia, Mark Alamo was in Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger. I caught that the other day. So Gul Dukat made an
Wow.
appearance.
Never had any idea about that.
Has a scene with Michael Ironside.
Good old Michael Ironside.
Yeah.
Someone who has not been in Star Trek.
Surprisingly.
Totally need to have him in the next movie or something.
So in many ways, this mission is not completely non-combat, but it's definitely combat is a very secondary focus.
Yes.
And it can't shoot Neelix.
I know there's a lot of people out there who hate Neelix. I am not one of them, to
Me
be
neither.
honest. And I've been watching a lot of Voyager lately and going back, and there's some really good material with Neelix.
Yeah, my favorite was the Metreon Cascade.
Yeah,
That was
a
great
good
one.
episode. That was a very early episode too.
Yes.
It's one of those things that made you understand why Neelix was a refugee in the first place. It's like, you have this person who's this awesome, great guy, knows a lot about the region. Wait, why isn't he living on his homeworld? Why doesn't he talk to the rest of his race? That was the big number one question about Neelix that you had at the beginning of Voyager, and that episode answered it.
Right.
It's a kind of character development, which is something I want to talk about later on in the show. So as far as this episode goes, I don't know. I've seen mixed reactions to the voiceover, but I thought his voiceover was great, Ethan Phillips, and I thought it was one of the ones that's the closest to what he sounded like in the show. So I don't know. What did you guys think about that?
I thought it was great.
Yeah, I liked it.
And
I think the only voiceovers that have really bugged me so far in this expansion, though, have been some of the Kabali. Because there's apparently some mismatch problems with the Kabali voiceovers.
You mean like the woman guy?
Yes, that one. But there's even some where
I mean, I guess you can explain it away with the Kabali virus. Oops.
But
Well, the Kobali do not reproduce sexually, so maybe their genders are a bit messed up from how we would think they would be, and the voices matching that.
I don't know. Maybe
I don't know.
the whole animation thing sometimes gets it wrong.
maybe she just smoked a lot.
It just it just gives us an excuse to carry on a long-standing Star Trek tradition of explaining away inconsistencies inside the universe.
yeah.
Oh, well, in that case, how many decks did the Enterprise E have?
I thought Picardo was a little off in the beginning anyway.
Well, honestly, I'm kind of wondering if he was supposed to be off in Mindscape.
Well, because of course in Mindscape, as we talked about last time, they're not real. The guys that you meet, except for Tuvok. So
I just thought, I don't know, he wasn't forceful
He sounded
enough.
he
in some
sounded
of
good
it.
to me in later episodes, and not,
Mm.
but not the mission that we'll I assume review later on in the show, or in in a future episode. That very first one that he was in, I didn't. He sounded weird there, but later on in the missions, he sounded good.
Yeah, I mean, it just took a little while to get back into it. That happens, I guess.
And I think sometimes the issues that we have with voiceover, sometimes it comes down to whatever direction they're getting from Cryptic.
And it's probably a lot more fresh in our minds than it is in his.
Could be.
Yeah, it's not like we've been watching Star Trek on repeat on Netflix for the last 20 years.
If these actors are anything like me, they'd probably never watch themselves.
That's because you're not the one who has to sit back and listen to the episodes again to make sure that nothing broke.
I
A
used
lot
to.
of them don't. A lot of them don't.
I don't read my own work, by and large, in the professional world, and I don't listen to the show again over again. So it's just something that I don't do. So I don't know. They may not watch their own work.
It's possible.
Well, I would guess that if the director or voice coach or whatever had something specific they wanted them to change, that would be a reason to do it. But otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say overall we were really lucky to get them all.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, in all fairness, voice acting is a very different affair from live acting. Just because you're literally, I mean, you're just sitting in there in a booth reading lines.
And you have to convey everything with sound.
Yeah. So I mean, some actors translate better and some don't.
Interestingly enough, though, these guys have all done it before. The 5 Voyager guys that we got this time, because they were all on Elite Force,
Which they were. That was in the middle of doing them doing Voyager, though.
It was, yes. And I know several of them have done voices since. I mean, Tuvok and then Tim Russ was in the first Dragon Age.
I'm kind of hoping that we get some of the TNG cast, because one of the things that Gargoyles was infamous for was the fact that it had something like half of the TNG cast in the series at one point or another.
One could hope, but I don't think many of them are cheap.
Money might be an issue.
Then I just vote for Jeff Combs.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That guy is awesome.
I just saw him.
That'd be
Let's
tough.
get him and have him do 5 different characters.
I saw him do Poe on last Friday night.
Well, I mean, Jeffrey Combs did do 5 different characters in the TV show.
7.
And sometimes more than one character in an episode.
Well, who was it? The guy who played Icheb? Didn't he post on Twitter that he would totally be interested in doing Stowe voice work?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I heard something about that.
And he is a kid.
he did.
I don't know how to pronounce his last name. His first name is Manu or something like that.
But yeah, I mean, Icheb is a character we've got in game. Admittedly, he doesn't do much, but still, I mean, and we can make him look more like Icheb.
Yeah,
we have a number of canon characters in game that don't have voiceovers,
So I think
don't have voiceovers from the actor.
I think it would be totally fun to get like Naomi and Icheb together and kind of do like an episode around them. Really, kind of expand their characters as adults in a way you couldn't as they were kids on the show.
Well, you can't even tell if Naomi Wildman is commander of K7, since it has an admiral's office, but she's not an admiral.
But she likes to fancy herself one.
It's just a traditional thing, they just never changed the sign.
Just like that map shows up somewhere later in the game as a completely different station, but it still says that it's K7.
Yeah, well, that's the cryptics desperately trying to make contact to get the game launched.
You're talking about the one where that's part of the.
The Romulan mission. Yeah,
I was
it's like
thinking of
Charon
that
3
mission
or something.
where you go to that colony infested with tribbles.
No, it's different from that one. It's basically it's a Romulan mission where you head to a Federation outpost to pick up medical supplies and then go to a Romulan breakaway colony to cure a virus.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah,
think it was
yeah,
that
yeah.
one.
Yeah, no, the Tribble one was Minas Corva, wasn't it?
Yes.
So getting back to this mission, this one that we're actually supposed to be talking about. What do you guys think of the map design?
Map
I
design's
want it.
awesome.
Yeah, beautiful.
This asteroid base is fantastic.
If we can get 2,000% fewer Talaxians, it'd be great.
Well, I don't think they put NPCs on stock maps. But
I think if there was one map from Delta Rising that if we could choose one map to put in the Foundry, for me it would be this one.
versus the interior of Voyager.
Yes, even more than that.
Wow.
I like the that
'Cause
rock
I
base.
think sort of a non-faction thing, a non-faction interior that's new and something we haven't seen before. It would be more beneficial to me than the Voyager interior.
So let me ask this a different way. If you had this map in the Foundry, what would you use it for?
Oh God, all kinds of things.
Well, I mean, good way to
Civilian
argue
trading
for it
stations and
Yeah, I mean, it looks like
hangars and
it looks
it's not
like
blown up.
like a kind of generic mining station almost.
Sure.
Ooh,
there's
also,
even
one
you
thing
can see
that would
like
be
a
very
control
very nice
center.
to have is if they did make this a map, clear out the cargo crates and the Talaxian shuttles.
Yeah, I get rid of the force field so that you can add your own and maybe actually use the space to fly in and out of.
Yeah. Also, being able to jump into the pit would be nice because let's face it, the pit has a floor. I don't get why we can't jump into it anyways.
probably just
Because that's how Taco builds maps.
I know.
He does not want you jumping places.
It's true.
Would you like to know how much time I spent on my first playthrough of this mission trying to jump into the hole?
And that's exactly why Taco does
That's
it.
Taco builds these maps just for you.
Do you not remember how he reacted when people got outside of Earth space dock?
I
How
know.
he's still reacting to that when Captain Smirk does it during his live streams.
Did Taco react to that?
Yeah. He Smirk tweeted him about it, and there's something like, sorry for doing that. And he tweeted back something like grumble. And so I tweeted him a meme of Clint Eastwood from Gran Torino saying, "Get off my scenery." But there's a few other space maps in this episode. There's kind of a nice looking exterior to this as well, with the asteroid base and the asteroid field, which I thought was quite nice.
It's nice, yes, because it gives us a big asteroid colony that's several kilometers larger than any of the ones we have already.
Mm-hmm.
That's nice, yeah. Also, it has a very different style than the ones we have currently, because the ones we have currently, well, they just have a very different aesthetic to them. They're like tailored to be like Federation or KDF or whatever bases, and this one, well, it doesn't really have distinctive markings on it.
Yeah, which is funny because I mean it's more or less modeled off the base that was seen in Neelix's final episode.
I just actually watched that not too long ago, and there's not all that much shown of that base except some corridors. So I think maybe that's why they didn't want to set it there, because there really wasn't much they could play with from the episode itself. I mean, they didn't show a big hangar like this and big cargo areas. Because, you know, they would have had to build that, and that's expensive. Didn't do near as much with green screen backgrounds in those days.
Another thing about this mission is a lot of optional things to do.
A lot of busy work,
Mm-hmm.
you might say.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of randomized busy work. You know,
Yes.
if you played it a couple times, you'll notice that the tasks they have you do are not always the same.
Right.
One time I think I was collecting things for the chef.
Yes, I did that one. The spices.
Did that.
Yeah. And then another one was sorting out a duty roster.
Haven't done that one.
Yeah, you have to get on.
Got to decide who should be working.
Right.
Why they're letting a total stranger do that, I don't know.
I know.
Because you're
And an
Starfleet
admiral
and you're
in
helpful.
Starfleet.
Well, they're Talaxians, and they're wondering if you might have a different insight into things that might be beneficial.
Because basically, while you may be Federation, Romulan, or Klingon, to the Telexians, you're all marks.
And you're an admiral at this point, so you're a paper
As in-
pusher
as in
already.
marks to be conned, is that what you're getting at?
Exactly.
Are you saying they're going to try and get on my ship and be the cook and poison everybody?
Free ride.
Well, no, but they do want something out of you.
Of course, having gotten the Delta Pack, I think I did get some Talaxian duty officers.
And they're all cooks.
Just one. Actually, let's see here. There's I forget whether it's a Benton or a Hazari, a Talaxian, and an Ocampan. Oddly, the Ocampan does not have either telekinesis or telepathy, which is strange to me, but whatever.
I don't need my Doff's brain melting me.
They can't all be as special as Cass.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But seriously, they're missing an opportunity there because they could put in the description of that buff if it had telekinesis. In quotes. Also, I could kill you with my brain.
Okay, what's your actual flow?
I just realized that Cass was basically the Wesley Crusher of Voyager.
Well, actually, the Dalar doesn't even have a quote. And her traits are honorable, resilient, spiritual, and tactful.
Well,
Yeah,
it's,
well.
it's better than the Kobali, the one that you get, or at least that I got. I got the infamous genitalia one.
Oh, yeah. Spelled with a J and an apostrophe, we should point out. But definitely a random name generator fail.
They have those a lot in this game. There
But
are
you
We have
cannot
a whole
put
Twitter
Janai
account
in.
for it.
However, you cannot use Janai in a Foundry mission because that is against
Sets off
the.
the filter.
Yeah.
What?
It's true.
Oh, you never heard that story?
No.
Back in the early days of the Foundry, in the Halcyon days, somebody
ago.
was trying to do call it an alphabet mission where you went through A is for this, B is for that. Well, they got to J is for Janai, and
J
the
is for
editor
Janai.
threw a fit.
Set off the profanity filter.
Yes. And it took forever to figure out why. Suffice it to say, it was actually not Janai, but it was the J is part.
Ah.
It
I know,
never
it
ceases
catches
to
some strange
amaze me
things,
just
yeah.
how moronic the profanity filter in this game really is.
Yeah.
Well, it basically, the profanity filter is plugged into the Urban Dictionary, which is why you'll find that, like, so many number combinations won't work.
It's like every stupid thing that anyone ever typed into their calculator.
Basically, the first one I ran into that I wish I'd never ever is You cannot use the word taint in the Foundry.
I know why, and
I know why now too, and I wish I didn't.
That's okay. You can't erect a
keep
force
in
field
mind-
either.
Yeah. Let's leave that one at that and move
So
on.
how about this
let's
mission?
just yes,
Yeah.
back to this mission again. Let's just wrap this up and say, what star rating would you give this mission?
I'd
Castmodean
I'm
or
gonna give
Dragoon, whoever wants to go.
I'll give it 2.5 stars. I'd give it more if there were less Phylaxians.
Oof.
Harsh, very harsh. All right, Dragoon, go for it.
I give it a solid 4. There aren't any really big surprises to the plot. It's really straightforward. But it's really kind of meant as an introductory mission. So, yeah, I'd give it 4 stars.
All right, Mark.
yeah, same.
Okay,
Because
Paul.
well, like you said, there's nothing particularly interesting about the mission. So it's basically a bunch of. It's a lot like the early story missions where you go someplace, meet people, and then you're done. It's
Okay.
a little bit more involved than that, but not much.
Paul, what's your star rating?
I'd say definitely 4. I liked it. I liked talking to Neelix. I liked running around in the base. Thought it was fun. You don't have to worry about getting attacked and blowing people away. It's relaxing. Relaxing Talaxians.
I'd have to agree with you guys. I'd give it a 4. I think if Mindscape is sort of the finale to the previous part of the game, and this is sort of a prologue to the actual Delta Quadrant stuff. So, yeah, and I think it works well for that because you start to get introduced to some of the races. My only complaint sort of is the Malon at the end. I think they just sort of come out of nowhere, and it's like there's not a whole lot of logical reason for them to be there other than we're in the Delta Quadrant now, so there's a bunch of Delta Quadrant races around, and let's throw one in here.
So, let me put it to you this way: what would be the most likely way that you would meet the Malon?
Well, exactly like you meet them in this mission, just not in this mission.
You'd warp into a system that was loaded with waste
Yeah.
data radiation.
So your complaint is really that it happens in this mission?
Yes. I think it'd be fine anywhere else. But that's my only complaint, and I mean it doesn't detract from my overall enjoyment of the mission, and I think the Malon are an interesting race and their ships are interesting, so I don't mind seeing them. But
They could have stuck it in a patrol where you were expecting just to go there, and all of a sudden, you warp in and they're there. But not having to do with
I will say because
Talaxians.
this is not, I think, a major spoiler, that the Malon don't figure heavily into any of the story missions. They don't have a story arc of their own. They could have had one. We could have had a big story arc to do with the Malon. That could have been more interesting.
So, I'm going to say that I don't think we are even close to done with the Delta Quadrant. And in fact,
we all know that. That's for sure.
I just finished up the Kabali arc, and it's definitely looking like they're setting stuff up for future content.
Well, several people have made remarks about the way the final mission ends, and to me, that sort of ending is one of those things where they might as well just to throw up in giant letters "to be continued."
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we know from Zeronius Rex's tweets that they're talking a lot about what's going to go on next year, and for sure we're going to stay in the Delta Quadrant for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, but we know that even going before Delta Rising launched, that they already had a plan leading up through the anniversary.
So
And
through February.
Yeah, and I can't help. It almost feels like, from what I've seen so far, Delta Rising is really Delta Rising Part 1.
Well, and they always used to say that, their releases weren't, they were continual. They weren't just, a one and that was your season release. It was, releasing certain things as you go through a season. And sometimes they've done that more and sometimes less. So I think, we're still in Delta Rising. Delta Rising didn't begin and end with that patch. So.
Well, now that you mentioned that, the season that they did that most with was the one where they had the Jim Hadar featured episode series, because that one they literally added stuff once a week, not just the missions themselves, but tweaks to the duty officer system. Because until Legacy of Romulus and Delta Rising, that was the biggest tweak to the duty officer system ever. But it wasn't all done at once. It was like stuffed in things over a period of several weeks.
Yeah, and that was done it was done during a season. It wasn't done at the beginning of a season either, if I recall correctly. All right, why don't we move it along? Dragoon, you have an interesting tech topic for us. Why don't you get that started?
Well, I will get it started, but we should probably talk about a different topic while I'm loading everything up.
Okay. Well, I can tell you, as you're loading that up, I can tell you about an interesting thing I watched over the weekend. As you all know from previous episodes, I'm a big fan of watching behind-the-scenes stuff, and I think it can give you good insight and give you ideas and things to talk about, especially with regards to writing and producing episodes. So the most recent one that I watched is on the Ultimate Edition of the final Harry Potter movies. It's basically the original author, J.K. Rowling, and the screenwriter who adapted it for the screen, Steve Kloves, interviewing each other for about an hour, which is just absolutely fantastic because they, of course, they've been working back and forth together for years on these movies, and it was just fascinating level of insights and a lot about how they worked together and how she was actually okay with a lot of the changes and found things that he had put in that she wished she had put in the original books, and so I don't know, I encourage everybody to watch behind the scenes stuff and especially commentaries. Anytime you find a commentary with one of the writers of an episode or a movie, give that a watch, because listening to things like that I think can help you in your production of Foundry missions.
That reminds me of something I read from the guy who writes Naruto, because when he wrote out the paper version of the series, he looked back on his work, and there were a bunch of things about his own work he didn't really like, but due to production constraints, he ended up being more or less stuck with doing it that way. Then later on, when it came time to make the TV show version, he tweaked things so that he fixed a lot of the things that he perceived as flaws in his own work, which is part of the reason why the anime is so different from the manga. It's because the actual original writer went back and decided to improve his own work.
That was another thing that J.K. Rowling talked about in this behind the scenes thing was, she did some critical looking at her own work in some of the books, especially parts of the fourth book, and she turns to the screenwriter and says, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry I saddled you with all of this."
Well, you know what they say, art is never finished, only abandoned.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite things that the screenwriter said was, he said, "I really grew to hate this thing that you do, where you begin the next chapter by saying, not much happened for the next 3 months. Because, how do you translate that into film? So I think that's why you get some scenes in some of the films. Like, I don't know, I remember the third one where you see several throughout the movie, several establishing shots of the big tree in various stages. The leaves are falling off or it's covered in snow, and that tells you that time has passed. I know passage of time is something that we struggle with in the Foundry. I had somebody tell me in one mission there, I'm suddenly at Deep Space Nine, and this dialogue comes up, and it's like, it's been a week, and you went here, and nothing panned out. I'm like, oh my god. Why didn't you show me all that?
Yeah, it's really hard to translate time in the Foundry.
Absolutely.
Usually the best I can do is loading screens.
All right, Drogyn, looks like are you ready to go?
Yep.
All right.
All right, so this week I wanted to cover the tech topic of combination puzzles. I know puzzles aren't something a lot of Foundry authors like to work with. I mean, it's not the most intuitive concept, especially since it's not a function that's natively built into the Foundry. That said, there are still a few kinds of puzzles that we can do, and I personally am always looking for new and interesting ways to kind of do that sort of gameplay, where it's something outside of just interact or shoot. So here I've got a situation. I've got a map that I built up earlier today. It's pretty basic. In fact, let me go ahead and load it up. Where basically I have locked your character in the closet, and your character has to get out. You can see here that there's a reach marker on the other side. And if we load up here, okay, so here's my closet. It's very nice. I worked very hard on it. And then here's our locked door. And we cannot advance the story until we get through it and trigger that reach marker. So the two assets that we have at our disposal is this console right here, and this captured Orion, who happens to know the code. So let's start off with the captured Orion. It's always easier to start off with the answer. So I'm just going to keep this simple and say, all right, the code is, 4321. Let's keep it simple. So that basically allows the player to find out what the code. Obviously, if you're doing this in a real mission, there would probably be something more elaborate with getting the code, like they have to go find it on a console or interrogate someone or something like that. A much more story involved way to get the code. All right, so let's go ahead and look at our console here. I'm going to go ahead and give it a default prompt. Now, a few people might be wondering why it is I don't do this in the timeline. And the reason is that I need to have it repeatable, but the only dialogue that I can make repeatable on the timeline is a talk to NPC, which I don't want to do this way. So I am foregoing having it in the timeline and then having this reach marker to detect when the player gets through. So we're just going to go for a default dialogue here. I'm going to go ahead and let's say, please enter the code. All right, so the way combination puzzles work is usually have a number of options that you have to enter in the right order. In this case, I don't want to make this too complicated, so I am going to have just 4 options. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. This doesn't necessarily have to be numbers, or it can be letters, it can be weird alien words. And so the way combination puzzles work is you usually have a correct path and a failure path. And we could, in theory, try and expand out every single possible combination, but that would be a royal pain. Let's go ahead and say.
Well, one thing that you could do is write into the mission some sort of a feedback loop that lets you know whether you're doing the puzzle right or wrong.
I could,
One real-world example is like if you're picking a lock, you can kind of sort of hear if the tumbler clicks into position.
yeah,
that
and
sort of thing.
basically, what would happen is you would just kick them to a failure immediately. But in this case, I don't want them just brute forcing the code, so I'm not going to tell them they're wrong until they've entered all 4 digits. So we've got a code here, and so what I'm basically doing here is I'm starting to build the failure combination, and I do that usually under the first dialog option because it'll want to default here, and then all wrong options lead onto this side. So okay, so 3rd digit, same thing. And then enter the last digit. Okay, so, and if they have gone through all of this, it should be access denied, exclamation point. And then it'll kick it out. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the winning scenario. So the code was 4321, so 4. And then we, just like the box before, we and the key to this here is to basically have both lines more or less look the same to the player, so they can't tell whether or not they're on the winning or losing track. All right, so 3 is the correct option here, so that takes us to the as you can see, if you're not careful, this can get complicated pretty quick. I mean, I'm only doing a 4-digit code with 4 possible characters in this already. And then, of course, the last one. Hang on. 4, 3, 2. Oh, I got that wrong. Okay. And you'll notice I've got a whole lot of random exits going on here, which I will take care of in a sec. And if they get all the way down here, having gone the right way, they get access granted, which means they won. Okay, so we've got our 2 paths over here and over here. but we need to take care of all of these loose threads. So this guy leads here, and something cool you can do that I found out as I was doing one of these is you can actually drag it. You don't have to drag it all over the box you want. You can just drag it to a link if you want to keep it simple. So anything except 4 here will end up over here, and the player is not going to have any way of knowing. So if we come over here, it goes here. So more or less becomes an all roads but one lead to the wrong answer. And on this line. And lastly over here. As you can probably guess, if you do more complex codes, this can get pretty tedious, but it still produces a pretty nice result. Okay, so we've got our combination all set up, but at the moment it's just telling us access granted or access denied. It doesn't do anything. So we need to head back to our map here, and we need to select our door. If you go over to the states, you can set a state by dialog prompt reached, which will give us our 2 dialogues we have on this map. And we're going to select the dialog here for our winning access granted. So if it gets to access granted, the door will open. And let's check this out. All right, so here's our closet. If we try to access this, let's try something. 2, 3, 1, 4, access denied. Okay, let's try 2, 2, 1, 4. And it'll do that for any combination except the correct one. And obviously the door didn't open for any of them. So let's talk to our capture Orion. The code is 4321. 4, 3, 2, 1. Access granted, and the door is open. Yay! Of course, running out here would trigger the event if I had actually remembered to hook it up. But you get the idea. You've now created a successful door puzzle. All right. That's how you do a combination puzzle.
Fantastic. Definitely a lot of potential uses for this sort of thing. Opening doors, retrieving information out of a computer, things like that.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that it's not a puzzle that can be easily brute forced, especially since it doesn't tell you whether you're winning or losing. But at the same time, it's probably less annoying than like a math puzzle.
Yeah. Like, I believe Bazag is fond of math puzzles, and I hate him a little for that.
I remember Zorbane doing a math puzzle in one of his missions.
Could be.
I don't remember who did the mission, but I remember one a long time ago where you had to calculate squares of numbers or the Fibonacci sequence or something like that.
Wasn't the first Valley of the Shadow?
It could have been.
You don't think so? Because you remember how a long time ago I mentioned this mission where you had to do this text puzzle to make these ruins rise up out of the water. It was that mission. I don't remember who the name of the person who made that mission.
I seem to recall Kirkvat had something with pillars. Or wait, maybe that wasn't Kirkvat. Maybe that was actually Have.
Could be.
I think it was Have, because I think it was the one where he had Helena as a goddess.
I don't think that was it, because if I remember right, this was one of the missions that was part of the exploration challenge, but I'm not entirely sure, because in this case you find the ruins and your task, and I don't remember all exactly.
So one thing I would caution people to do is you make your puzzle too long and involved, you run the risk of making people a bit frustrated with it, and they'll give up and not rate your mission very high. So, if it's going to be a long puzzle, I would say have a method of brute forcing your way through it or bypassing it.
Shoot the console.
Shoot the console.
It was a boring conversation anyways.
It'd be fun if we could do destructible objects.
Set phase to unlock.
Well, one thing someone suggested in a previous show was add an option where if you do the puzzle wrong, you can click a button and have your bridge officer do it for you.
That's always an option, sort of a make it a plot point almost. All right, let's move along to another topic. There's something that I wanted to talk about tonight, which is something that seems to be kind of essential for storytelling to me, which is character development. Basically, the idea is, your character starts off at one place at the beginning of the mission and ends up in an entirely different place, metaphorically speaking, at the end of the mission. Something about them changes, and there's sort of two ways to do it, which is the first is something about them changes. They realize something about themselves, they change their attitude, they change their viewpoint on something. And then another one is your view of that character changes as more is revealed about them. And I asked around for some examples of these kinds of things, and got some interesting responses. One of them is for the type where the character changes over time. And a good example of that, as was pointed out to me on Twitter, is Walter White from Breaking Bad. Starts off as a straight-laced school teacher with a family and ends up as a drug dealer who is alone. So, by the end of the series, obviously that's really taking it to extremes, but, it was a long series, and that's the kind of thing you can do over a long series.
Well, I mean, I've seen some TV shows where they would, have, for various reasons, someone's personality drastically change over the course of the TV show. I mean, I mentioned Naruto earlier in the context of the whole writer's commentary thing, but the writer of that one would, in cases of major story events, would sometimes have a character to go from being a good guy to a bad guy, or vice versa. I mean, I did the mention of the whole thing where Tintin fights Tamari in the chat box. Well, when Tamari first showed up, she was one of the bad guys, but didn't stay that way for long. And she was actually acted a lot nicer later on in the show, because she realized that she needed to have friends, and since she couldn't just simply smack everyone around and make them do what she wanted.
Yeah, that's a very good example. And it's usually sort of an internal thing where the character realizes something and realizes what they need to change about themselves, or you can have circumstances change them where they necessarily didn't want to be that way, but they have to be.
Yeah, I think of Rick in The Walking Dead.
Mm-hmm. He's somebody who's definitely dramatically changed from how he was at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
I would say one of the things to kind of watch out for if we're telling one of these types of stories is to not have the change be too sudden. I think
Mm-hmm.
one of the stereotypes is a sudden, like, life-altering event. But I think the more believable character developments tend to be a series of gradual steps.
Yeah, like over a
Or
series.
in the case of a sudden event, you don't just have them like suddenly completely change. I mean, because, well, like in the case with Tamari, is that she was, before and after, she was still a brash, arrogant person who tended to yell at people just because she was annoyed. It's just that, she treated people less like dirt than before.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of a big life-altering event, it usually takes a little while for the effects to completely transform somebody.
Yeah. It's not that people don't change, it's people don't tend to change quickly.
Yeah, they don't change overnight. I definitely believe that people do change. I've changed. So I think what we're talking about is, you want to make the character progression believable in that it's not, not sudden and sort of a logical change based on circumstances, based on changing attitudes, based on, growing up. If it's a kid or something, people change as they grow up. Another good example of this is Londo Mollari from Babylon 5. He definitely
yes.
he starts that series in a vastly different place from where he ends up.
And the funny thing is that I would almost say that it's two character development arcs, because it's a slow descent for the first half of the show, and then once he realizes what's really going on, it's a slow redemption. And in fact,
actually, in Londo's case, he actually had two different character development story arcs. One where he, went from being, well, I would describe them differently. One where he went from being a guy who thought that he was, the shit, I guess is the best way to put it. And then he realized that he needed to have an alliance with the Narn because, the Centauri couldn't simply do whatever they wanted to anyone they wanted. And, over time he became friends with Jakar and started to work on building alliances with the other races. And then, they have the Shadow War, and you see just how much Londo was willing to do. And then at the end, you have him with that Drac parasite in his shoulder that tries to force him to do things.
I during my Twitter conversation with the person who suggested Londo, I said that his relationship with Jakar is sort of the way by which you see his character changing over time.
yeah, because it's really embodied in their relationship.
Mm-hmm. And Jakar changes a lot over the course of the series too, and I think you see a dramatic event, several dramatic events, and how they change him over time. The first one, of course, is him going to the Outer Rim and seeing the first ones there, and somebody's cat is not happy.
That's mine. Oh, he's happy enough. He just...
Mm-hmm. Is that your in-game cat or your out-of-game cat?
No, that's my actual cat.
Do the two look similar?
Yes.
Yeah, that's Simon Prime.
So yeah, the first one is where Jakar goes to the Outer Rim and he sees that the shadows are returning, and that definitely changes his outlook and his attitudes. You can see it's quite dramatic. And then, of course, his world being occupied and bombed by the Centauri is the other big change. You see how those affect him over time. And I another example I got from people was this is one where the development is you seeing how more insight into that character as more is revealed about them. It says the courier from Fallout New Vegas. Now this is something that I haven't played, but the person I was talking to said that essentially this character starts out as a blank slate. You don't know much about them at all. And very gradually throughout the game, you find out more and more about them, and you find out many, many, many dramatic and crazy things about them. And so that character definitely, for you, is different at the end than he was at the beginning.
I haven't played it personally either, but from what I've heard, it's basically the story is the character basically has amnesia at the beginning, and so it's rediscovering his past life.
Ah. That almost in a way is like the original Knights of the Old Republic. Because you start off as a character that has no memory of their past, and you gradually figure out why that is. And you either embrace that past or you repent from it. So, in the context of Foundry missions, I mean, obviously we deal a lot with characters. I think the only way that you can even hope to have a good Foundry mission is to have characters. This is something I mentioned in a review several episodes ago. And I think to make your characters interesting, they need to have development. You need to either find out new things about them, or you need to have them find out new things about themselves and change over the course of your mission. Doesn't have to be a lot, but it was something that we saw in Star Trek a lot, and I think it's something that people need to be cognizant of when they're making a mission.
Even if it's a series and you develop it slowly over a series of 3 or 4 missions.
I say a series is even better to do it in, because you have I don't know, what would you say? You have more time to do it gradually, and so you can make bigger changes and have them feel natural.
Yeah, because, well, I suppose using another Naruto example would be a bit... never mind. Anyway, that was actually something that Kishimoto did several times, is he would actually have to do some pretty drastic changes, like having Sasuke become a bad guy and then a good guy again. But he actually explained the reasons over a long period of time. It's not like one day Sasuke leaves and decides he wants to be evil.
That's something you want to avoid for sure, is that just sudden, oh, I'm evil now.
Now, probably something we should talk about more is we talked a lot about a character changing themselves, but what about the situation where a character himself doesn't really change, but their understanding of the situation changes?
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Try to think of some examples of that.
I think Star Trek would be full of them.
Yeah.
Well, situation changing. Rick Grimes again would be a good example right there. I mean, he went from being the law and order cop to the entire world going to heck in a handbasket. That's a pretty dramatic situation shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he does realize he's learning a lot of lessons as that series goes on, and learning how to live in this world, and in some ways how to be a good person and still live in this world, which actually still means doing bad things, you might say.
You went to a really dark place and came back again.
Mm-hmm. Several times.
I want to reference the Kabali arc, but I can't because we haven't gotten that far. Because that's a great example.
I could do another Naruto example.
Let's see. Well, here, what about the original Vodwar episode from Voyager? What is it? Dragon's Teeth? Yeah.
Well, okay.
Where it starts out. You helping.
Go ahead, Mark.
I'm Aaron.
Yeah, that one was very interesting because, Voyager's like, ooh, these people are in trouble. Let's rescue them. And then the Turay are like, oh my God, what have you done?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was... Voyager's cast did not change in that. It's their understanding of the situation that changed.
Yes.
Well, I would say using Voyager then, 7. 7's situation changed rather dramatically for her,
Mm-hmm.
and she had to adapt.
Yeah, but was that a
and
personal
assimilate
change
it
or
into
a
culture.
situational
And it was a long
change?
process. It was a personal change forced by a situational change,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
as can often happen. Another good example of like a series-long development arc, and those are the best kind, to my mind, is Tom Paris.
Oh yeah.
You know, he goes from being, first of all, a convict and an arrogant flyboy to being a family man who, the most telling statement of that entire show happens in the final episode where him and Harry are arguing about, Harry wants to go back into the nebula and he says, "What, don't you want to get home?" And Tom says, "I am home."
Yeah.
I will say one of my disappointments with a lot of the Voyager cast members was that the development was not longer. So many of the characters acclimated almost immediately. I mean, B'Elanna was like, what, 1 episode? And she was fine. And then,
Well-
I mean, let's face it, Tom Paris didn't really do... I think he had 1 episode where he really rebelled, and that was it. For the most
there's
part,
some-
One or
characters that
two
actually
episodes
make-
where he really rebelled, and then one where he fake rebelled as a way to fake out the
Yeah.
Kazon. But
yeah, I mean, all of his real rebel...
it did happen very quickly. A lot of it.
Yeah, so I mean...
Well, one thing that I thought of about that situation is that for the Maquis, the only thing that they really needed to get used to was living with the idea that Janeway makes the rules. And aside from that, it really wasn't a whole lot different than the situation they were used to because, they were used to running for their lives because the Cardassians wanted to shoot them for being squatters and whatnot.
I don't know. I think there's a lot more differences between the Maquis and the Federation than that.
I
Regulations
mean,
are going to be a lot looser in the
that
Maquis.
came up a lot.
Well, they had that episode with the 4 Maquis that Tuvok was training.
Oh, that was one
Yeah.
of the best Voyager episodes ever.
Well, yeah, it was like 4. You got 4 dissenters, and amongst all that Maquis, it's one of the funny things. I always kind of felt like Chakotay was the nicest freedom fighter I'd ever met.
He was
Well,
a
I mean,
serene freedom fighter.
He's a Renaissance
People-
man.
People
A
who
warrior
actually, are freedom fighters because they want to make the world a better place, a lot of them are nice. The not nice ones are the ones who have less noble reasons for being a freedom fighter.
Yeah, but like every time he rebelled against Janeway, it was because he was right and Janeway had gone off half-cocked.
And now he's the head of Starfleet Intelligence,
Is he really?
according to 2409.
Really?
Oh, yeah, Chakotay.
And now I wish we had gotten him for Delta Rising.
Yeah, that's sneaky Chakotay.
Can you imagine if it was
I heard
Chakotay
Delta
standing
Quadrant-
there instead of Burgess?
I heard that he is not really all that keen on the Star Trek stuff
Well,
in this day and age.
The basic gist of what I heard is that Beltran, to him, it was a job, and it wasn't necessarily his favorite job he'd ever done.
I don't know. I mean, I saw him in Chicago. He seemed generally fine with it.
Well,
Oh yeah,
it's
I mean,
not that
he
hates
fully
it.
admitted it was a job. I mean, nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, Brooks was like that too for the longest time. Now he's at
And then
the
he went off his
convention every year.
medication.
Yeah, I think he's great. I do.
I mean, honestly, Beltran,
Well,
if
he
you pay him, I think
bear
will show
hugged
up.
you, so of course he
Yeah.
thinks great.
That's true. Nice guy.
You got bear hugged by Avery Brooks.
Yeah, oh yeah. Practically squeezed the breath out of him.
Well, Avery Brooks has always been one of those people who was, I guess you could say, congenial. I'm not sure what the right word for this.
I'm sorry, my entire outlook of him was colored by Spencer for Hire. So yeah,
And the captains.
yeah, the
And
captain
I'm-
broke me.
I'm just thinking here about American History X. So
Oh, it's a great movie.
yeah,
Okay, well, another
Anyway.
situational one, staying
Yes.
in the Star Trek universe, I'll throw out there, Jonathan Archer, season 3.
And even more so if you read the Federation First 150 Years book. Because you realize the effects of all of the, let's charitably call them incidents that he was involved in and mistakes that he made.
How many
And-
wars did
and,
he
you
By
start?
know,
being
the-
Captain
the,
Angry Pants.
and the things that he did that only looked like mistakes at the time.
But you see that in a way that, just to spoil the book a little bit, but it posits that the Prime Directive was essentially his idea because of all these early experiences that he had.
Well, in the TV show, there's actually a point in where he alludes to that because there's that one episode where he's doing this monologue where he's talking about how there ought to be a set of rules telling Starship Captain how
I think
to.
I remember that.
Yeah, that was the Phlox genocide episode.
Well, there was the one with Malcolm
Which is
and the
Castmodean's favorite, I
tricorder,
think.
where they were almost killed.
Oh, yeah.
Wait,
I'm
was
not-
that the one where Al showed up and he didn't leap away?
Not quite.
Well, Al's role was something along the lines of an alien dictator, wasn't it?
Prison warden or something like that.
I think it was Prison Warden, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the Sulaban one. Dean Stockwell.
Yeah.
Dean Stockwell was in Enterprise?
Which is a good episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, first season, maybe second?
I need to go rewatch.
It's one of
First
it's
couple
one of
seasons.
those.
Yeah.
Well,
It's one of those where you
there-
think sort of a
He-
stunt casting situation where
it's
Yeah.
like what someone said earlier in the show about how there's been a whole lot of people show up in Star Trek for one episode.
oh, absolutely.
Is it pretty bad that we just all keep hoping for a Dean Stockwell? Just based on his other name.
Well, it certainly wouldn't be bad.
Never mind. I've completely lost that one.
Well, it's they really missed a golden opportunity to end Enterprise with Captain Archer leaping into somebody else.
The holodeck dematerializes.
I want to tell you, I had a
It
complete
was all just an episode of Quantum Leap, all of Enterprise.
Mhm.
I had a complete plan of a way cooler ending to Enterprise that involved time travel.
Yeah, because the time travel theme went so well with Enterprise.
Mm,
No,
I don't know.
would've hoped
When
that-
used right, it's good.
Some of it was good.
I
Some
think
of
they
it
should have
was
avoided it
less
altogether.
good.
Yeah, apparently it didn't gel with the audiences, which is
'Cause
why
they're
they
afraid-
kind of just skipped over the temporal Cold War stuff and just arbitrarily ended it.
Because they never did anything with it. It was all, something might happen, something might happen, something might happen. Nothing's happening.
Well, the problem is that if something happened, you'd never know it because the timeline's been changed.
Because
Well,
yeah, I mean,
that's
if
why
they,
I stuck Future Guy into a mission of mine and had him tell your player that everything that's been happening in the last 300 years, that is the temporal Cold War
well,
and beyond.
my point was that you got Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis in for the episode. Do something cooler with them than recreate a TNG episode. You could have them being brought back in time or some other such thing by Daniels and have this elaborate finish. I guess probably they didn't have enough time to write something that cool, but that
And
would have been
besides,
totally
they already
awesome.
did it. They went back and created First Contact. I mean,
But I'm just saying that you could have tied it in together much better than let's invalidate the final episode.
Well,
they-
I wouldn't say invalidate, but yeah. It came across very strangely.
Yeah.
But I kind of have to wonder if it's something that they'd written as a script for a season finale and not a series finale.
Well, If you've ever listened to the behind the scenes, they talk about it, and it's basically when Enterprise was canceled, they were basically looking at it as the end of the TNG era, and that was the thought process going into that episode.
Mm. That's something I hadn't really considered before, because I mean it is the end of that era since the 87 or 89 when TNG started of the continuous run of Star Trek.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, everything, even Enterprise was derivative of TNG. I mean, just their whole storytelling method and stuff like that.
And anybody who complains about the NX model,
flip Akira.
Akira Prize.
Whatever.
They missed an opportunity too, because it was re-energized in season 4. They should have given it a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you're getting into corporate politics, and I mean.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well,
just saying,
and
franchise fatigue and all of that. Yeah.
But of course, the point being that Jonathan Archer, during the whole Xindi crisis, was changed by the events around, or directed by the events around him, and became a harder, possibly meaner person for a while because of it.
And it made it more interesting.
You see it for sure in that the episode where he goes hiking with what's her face.
Yeah.
Oh, Erica
Hernandez.
Yeah.
Hernandez,
Yeah.
Yay, we brought this conversation back around to the topic.
Full circle. We wander a lot tonight. But we actually had a interesting question from Hippie John in the chat room to change the subject. He's asking, with Delta Rising going on, has anyone been inspired to do Delta Quadrant stories?
Kind of burdens with the stories I already have.
There's a little bit of that, as I had already started a Delta Quadrant story, but now I can do more with it, I think.
I'm doing mine now.
Which, getting Delta Quadrant doors would be very nice toward that end.
Yes, that would be extremely helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's your answer, is some yes. Mine is that Hirogen mission, but now I can do more with it because we got Kobalian, we got Thought War, and we got all kinds of Delta Quadrant races.
Yeah, they always belonged in the Delta Quadrant anyway. I was surprised to see them when the game first launched.
Yeah. But I think their story is interesting because you go back to the 2409 stuff, the Path of 2409. You get this interesting part about Sela meeting them as she was exiled and in the far reaches of space. So that's essentially the story that I want to tell.
Cool.
Let's see. There was another question as well in the chat room. Is how do you prepare to do a big series? I think a lot of us here have done mission series. Obviously, we have 3 Purity authors here. So I don't know. How do you guys, when you're going to start a big series, how do you do it? What's your process?
From my perspective, I don't think I ever thought of them as series until I did the first one. And then I said, well, this isn't finished. I've got more. And I'd release one episode and then start right away on the next. But I don't think I ever planned 3 missions and then separated them, you know? I think I just added.
I've kind of done it both ways, where before the Foundry even started, I've told this story before, but I think some of our new listeners haven't heard it. Before the Foundry even hit the Tribble server, they released some information about it, and that's what brought me back to the game. And I sat down, because of course I couldn't build anything yet, so I sat down and outlined a 5-part series, all involving the Romulan Empire. And I outlined it, in broad strokes first. I got, here's my 5 missions. Here's where we're going to start. Here's where we're going to end up. and here are the plot points that we hit in the middle. And then I started figuring out, okay, we need to go to this planet, and we're going to talk to these guys, and then we're going to fight these guys, and all of that. And so, taking a very broad look at things and then whittling it down and down into the finer details. But then I've also done it the same way that you were describing earlier, which is, I built one mission and then it's like, okay, there's more I have to tell here, so what's the next one?
Yep. I think Purity was the only time I ever just wrote a full story and then said, I have to cut this into 5 pieces. At the time, it was 5. And then you try to find places that it can be cut.
Little advice for everybody is don't try and shoehorn a 6th part in. Sorry, Baz.
That's okay. He left.
Worked out so bad.
I think it worked out.
I think it got a worse rap than it deserved.
Yeah. I said it's actually a good mission. It's just a bit more sort of abstract than any of the others.
Well, it had to be. It had to not affect what was before it or after it. Yep.
Yeah, that does always make something awkward.
Mm-hmm.
When you, it's kind of like a filler episode of a TV show where things happen, but it doesn't. If you never watch that episode, it won't make the show less enjoyable.
I know when I started doing Midas, I had a loose outline for all 3 parts before I put out part 1.
On Purity, it was interesting because, we had, for each different part, we had essentially, what was it, like a 5-paragraph summary?
Yeah, just plot points.
Mm-hmm. Hitting the major plot points.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we were sort of free to make the mission as we saw fit.
Well, yeah, and you didn't want to force an author to not create.
Yeah, since we had different authors on each one. And it was, I found it kind of funny because then I suggested, let's all start outlining our missions, and I think it was Relentime said, "What's an outline?"
Well, that's kind of a funny thing.
Yeah, well, Drogyn, the whole Eiffel Tower thing was your idea. Then, yeah, and then we just didn't know how to do it. And then Serb said, "I can do it."
Having that sort of extraneous map designer out there at large who wasn't doing a mission himself was quite helpful.
I have a funny feeling if I ever did a collab project, that would be my best role.
What I'm going to do here is I'm going to post an outline in the chat room, and then we can put it in the show notes. So if people want to see what my outlines look like, that will be a good example. So let me create one here. Go on.
Actually, that got to something about one of the missions I did. Is that when I did Diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant, I actually plotted out the episode by writing things down in a notebook while I was at work over the weekend and away from the computer. And I even did like a sketch of one of the ground areas. Granted, the finished result looked nothing like the sketch because, well, for starters, this was before they added the ability to have water planes in the Foundry. Otherwise, I would have gone with a sky castle. But I had to find a ground map that had a pond in it because I wanted a body of water in as the centerpiece of this map. But I scripted the missions to decide what the player was going to do, etc., etc., etc. I didn't write the dialogue out, but I plotted out the basics of what you were going to do before I started working on the mission at all. And, well, I kind of threw in a bunch of little twists and turns after I wrote the mission, because after writing the mission, I realized that it was well, somewhat boring, the way I'd originally scripted it.
So I just posted in the chat room, and we'll include it in the show notes, an example of an outline that I've made. This is for a project that's, you might say, going back to our last episode, it's on my wall of crazy. I don't know. I'm always torn by the 2800 series because I sort of feel like maybe there was some of the missions could have been different and possibly better. So I wanted to rewrite it using that concept and go in different directions. So that's it's a 5-part series, kind of aping the one that Cryptic did in some ways and diverging from it in very significant ways. You start out being attacked on the ground and hearing about the attack on DS9, hearing about them being pushed off DS9. And it's a very, intense and, like a war movie going on the ground on one of the moons of Bajor. And then you go in various places, various directions, and end up, of course, retaking DS9 because that's where you sort of have to end up. But, when I outline something, I start with, A, B, C, D, E, and F are, the maps. And then I start with, okay, this is map A. 1, you get your orders. And 2, you warp out to such and such. And then go from there. And I imagine everybody does differently.
I generally tend to figure out the large plot shifts, like from a very high level. And then after that point, I'll start going into specific maps. Because a lot of times the map design and layout will dictate the small, minute plot development.
Yeah, I like when that happens.
For diplomacy in the Gamma Quadrant, I basically decided that, my outline went basically that you go to the Klingon Council chambers because the High Council has summoned you to go do something. Then you go to the mission start door, which is the transporter console in Clonus. I actually wrote a specific reason for that. Then you transwarp to a solar system in the Gamma Quadrant. You talk to the Jim Hadar. You beam down to the planet. You talk to Loris and do some inane tasks because Loris feels like yanking your chain. Then you go into a facility that the Vorta have on the planet. Do some more inane tasks because Loris is still yanking your chain. Then once you get done with that, you beam up and fight some guys because they showed up. I didn't I didn't actually plan out the reasons behind why the Vorta were yanking your chain when I did the scripting for the mission or outline. That's something I made up later because, Laura struck me as the kind of person who, what's the word for it? Is capricious. And she does things because she wants to do them, not so much because she thinks they're in everyone's best interests. Of course, that comes second to doing what the founders want. But in the case of people who aren't the founders, she doesn't really care what you want.
I think the Foundry really, to my mind, lends itself well to doing outlines because, you already have that sort of structure where you have to do each map independent of each other. And the storyboard section of the Foundry is almost like an outline already. So that just seemed to be a natural way for me to organize things before I start a mission. And half the stuff I already have in my head anyway. It's just, getting it on paper helps get it all straight in my head. Figure on paper, of course.
Having that overarching outline really helps, though, when you're starting to get into the minutia and building of kind of keeping everything going back to supporting that broad outline.
There is one aspect of Foundry writing that I have found a paper outline to be indispensable for. That is doing dialogue puzzles that involve multiple characters. Because there is nothing in the Foundry that will actually show you how the different dialogues interact with each other. You need to write it down on paper to keep it straight. And that was one of the things that I did for that mission. Although none of the dialogue puzzles were actually things that you needed to do, I stuck them in for the fun of it.
Well, that's about all the time we got for tonight. So, Drogyn, why don't you throw up our contact info?
Okie dokie. We can be reached at email at foundryroundtable@live.com, where you can send suggestions for topics you want us to cover, missions you'd like us to review, or just generally want to tell us how we're doing. We'd love to hear it. You can also reach us on Twitter at Foundry Roundtab. Unfortunately, Twitter would not let us make the handle any longer, so it gets a little cut off there. Drogyn can be reached at Drogyn1701. Markhawkman can be reached at MAR and I, of course, can be reached at Greendragoon. Cast, Paul?
I'm at PFDennis.
And I'm at Castmodean, or also I do have monitoring on the at Starbase UGC Twitter.
Which is more or less pretty much his personal Twitter now.
That's not true.
More rather than less. All right. Well, we will say goodnight.
Hey. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Thanks for having me.
Doom tomorrow. There's always doom tomorrow.
Delayed till the next day.